Thank you for joining us, everybody. It's nice to see your faces. And TJ Klune, of course, thank you so much for being with us. We read your very incredible book this month, to much acclaim, I must say. The House in the Cerulean Sea. We can't wait to dive in. But first, I'll do a little mini introduction, just your bio from your website. TJ Klune is a Lambda Literary Award-winning author and an ex-claims examiner for an insurance company, which you'll have to explain further. His novels include the Green Creek series, The House in the Cerulean Sea, and The Extraordinaries. Being queer himself, TJ believes it's important, now more than ever, to have accurate, positive queer representation in stories. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Can you introduce yourself beyond the very short introduction that I gave?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Thank you first and foremost for having me here. I greatly appreciate it. And I actually just got off the phone with my editor, and The House in the Cerulean Sea just got back on the New York Times bestseller list this week. So thank you for that, and for purchasing my book and talking about it. That makes me very happy, and I'm very humbled by that. A little bit about me. I am a queer author, born and raised in Oregon, rural Oregon, a very poor area of rural Oregon. And books have always been my safe space. I grew up going to the library because we couldn't afford necessarily to buy books, but the library was my saving grace. As a kid, I would ride my bike into town every day during the summer just so I could read books, and I'd read everything I could get my hands on, whether it be fiction or nonfiction, or even if it was well above my reading level, I wanted to read everything I could. And I also knew that I wanted to be a writer from a very, very young age, because when I was 6 or 7, I would carry around this notebook with me wherever I went, and just fill it with stories that I'd make up off the top of my head. And I actually found one of those old notebooks a few months ago. And 7-year-old TJ writer was quite something. Let me tell you, there was a lot of the stuff in that was very cringeworthy for me to read at this age now. But I think that the best description of how it was for me was that I didn't get a lot of validation as a kid. When you're a loudmouth, queer, effeminate kid with ADHD growing up in rural Oregon, it doesn't really have a lot of support. There was not a very big support network for me and something like that. So it wasn't until I got to 7th grade when I had the two most amazing teachers that I'd ever had who changed my life completely, Mrs. Benson, Mrs. Pfeiffer. They were my English teachers, and they were the first ones that told me that I was good at writing and that I had something there. And on my very last class with them, right before summer, they told me that one day they would see my name on a book in a bookstore. And unfortunately, they have since passed, but my first book came out in 2011, and I was able to send them both copies so they could stow that, because I am proof positive of the power of teachers and what they can do to change lives. So I've been published since 2011. I was on the indie scene for quite a few years. The House in the Cerulean Sea was my first big call up to the big leagues, I guess you could say, when I got picked up by Tor. And that came out in March of 2020. And I'm still baffled and humbled and blown away by how many people have read the book, especially since, again, it just got on the New York Times bestseller list again for some reason. And I don't know why, but I'm totally okay with that.
So that's such a beautiful story, especially right now. I feel like teachers are really having a hard time. So
I know. I've heard from a lot of teachers. I've heard from, especially since the book came out, because you have to remember, The House in the Cerulean Sea came out in March of 2020, and it came out literally the week the pandemic kicked into high gear and everything started shutting down across North America. And I've heard from so many teachers and so many students that the book help them feel not so alone. And that is something that I never, ever considered, but then I never thought the world would be where it was in 2020, so.
Now, you talk about, so 2020, you got called up to the big leagues. Now, do you write full time? Because even like some authors that have published hundreds of books, I mean, that's still a big deal.
Yeah, no, I I have. I've been writing full time since before this, because I found, for whatever reason, I found some pretty good success on the indie scene, and I was able to quit my job of 10 years at an insurance company to write full time in 2016. So I've been doing it for the last 5 years now, over 5 years, and it is the scariest but best decision I've ever made for myself. And I get to do what I love every single day. And not a whole lot of people get to say that. And so I do count myself among the blessed and fortunate to be able to do that.
Well, congratulations. And we're
Thank
certainly
you.
that you get to do that, because your book really did, you can, if you have the chat window open, see the love pouring in for your book. And we'll have, Joanne, you sent a question to me, but I wonder if you want to ask it live. You're certainly welcome to. If I just put you on the spot, I can come back to you in a minute or two. Maybe we will come back to Joanne once she remembers what questions she sent me. I did have a lot of people email questions in, so
okay, yeah, whatever questions you have, that's totally fine.
let's so there's a whole bunch from Denver, and Ariana is the host for Denver, and she's writing in the chat window. She says that Denver unanimously loved this book, and she said they usually have a handful of dislikes or so-sos.
Well, that's good. that certainly makes my job a little bit easier right now.
So Tammy from Denver wanted to know if Charles, if you picked Linus to shut down the island because he was sour about his relationship with Arthur, and how old is Charles?
Charles Werner. Yes, I have this whole canon backstory in my head of him and Arthur's relationship. But he is, I think from what I had in my notes, he is between Linus and Arthur's age. So he's like 41 or 42, and he is power hungry, and that's all he is. That's all he cares about is power. And he used Arthur to get to what he wanted out of Arthur, to be able to become part of extremely upper management. And I had this whole side story that I wanted to write for him just so I could show how nasty he was, but I just couldn't find a way to make it fit into the book itself without it being very extraneous and not making a whole lot of sense from Linus's perspective. But he is he is after a former he is based on a former supervisor that I used to have in my own cubicle sucking job, soul sucking cubicle job that I was able to escape. And so the best thing a writer can do is get revenge by putting people in their works. So
I like that. Another question from Denver came from Jess, and she wants to know if Lucy made it rain when Linus left the island.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. I'm sure that he did something terrible or something to show his sadness. But I think a lot about what Lucy's powers could be and how far and what extent that they can go. And maybe one day I'll get to explore that and see what that looks like a little bit further.
Oh, that's a question that we have two questions about sequels. One about a Yeti sequel and one about the House in the Cerulean Sea sequel.
Yeah, I can neither confirm nor deny, as my publisher would like me to say, I can neither confirm nor deny if and when I will be writing a sequel. But I will say that if I were to go back and write more about these characters, that I would want to make sure that the story could be on par with the first one, because we've all read popular books where the sequel came out and it was not very good, and it could affect your opinion on the first book. And I want to avoid that as much as possible. I don't want to dilute what the first book had. So if I were to write a sequel, I would have to have an idea on par with the first book. And I'm not quite there yet, but I will say that I too am very, very curious about David the Yeti and what he would bring to the island. If there was going to be a sequel, it would be following the same characters. I know that for a fact. So who knows, maybe one day. I just have to sit down and really think if it's the right thing to do for these characters, or if it could just be a happy story with a beginning, middle, and ending told over one book.
All right, fair enough. The next question we have is actually the audiobook. Somebody says the audiobook was fantastic. I haven't heard the audiobook myself, but who narrates the audiobook?
Daniel Henning. That's the first time I've ever worked with him, and he is probably one of the most brilliant narrators I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So much so that he was actually nominated for his role in this book for the audiobook community's highest award, the Audi Awards. He was nominated for best science fiction fantasy narration, and I can't imagine the book with anybody but him. He is the voices of these characters completely, and when I think about them, I hear his voices that he did for the characters.
That's awesome. Somebody in the chat wants to know, sorry, not somebody. Mary wants to know if it will be adapted into a movie.
You guys are going to get me in trouble. I cannot confirm nor deny if there is an adaptation in the works, but as soon as I have any information, I will be sure to release that accordingly.
Very good. One question I have is there anywhere in the world that there are drawings of your characters? Because I would have really loved.
Oh yeah, I retweet them all over my Twitter all the time. I have people retweeting everything. If you look at my Instagram, you'll see some, when the book came out in March, you'll see that we made some character creations for a few of the characters, but they are all over my Twitter. There is so much wonderful fan art from the house in the Cerulean Sea, and some of it all of it is just jaw-dropping, because any art, no matter the level of skill, is just beautiful to me. But there is some that will absolutely just knock you senseless, and all different styles. It's just gorgeous. But yes, there's plenty art. You just have to look for it.
Okay, there's a question in the chat who probably the best question for an adaptation, if they were to make one, not saying that they are, but who would you want to play Linus?
I don't know. Let's see, that's a problem, because if you pick someone famous, you will see that person. Like every time I see a movie with Brad Pitt in it, I'm like, that's Brad Pitt. I don't care what role he's playing. I know that that's Brad Pitt. However, somebody made a suggestion on Twitter once, and I have to say that this is the one person I do not want playing Linus. It was their suggestion, and that was James Corden, the British actor.
Okay.
Somebody thought he should play Linus, and I said that hurt my heart a little bit, because no offense to Mr. Corden, I'm sure he's nice and wonderful, but just not what I would be looking for the role of Linus. But I don't know. I think that maybe either Arthur or Linus would probably need to be played by somebody with some kind of celebrity, but I'd like to see a bunch of unknowns for the most part. It maybe actors who have been in indies before and stuff like that. But who knows? We'll hopefully get to see one day.
Okay, so Joanne, I have your question here. Joanne loved the book, and she wanted to know if you thought that she thought it was a YA novel, but she realized very early on that it was much more than that. She says she laughed, she cried, she swore, she shook my fist and held her hand over her heart. As an author, how do you go on to write the next novel knowing the bar has been set so high? Do you fear that the words won't flow?
Some days. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term imposter syndrome. If you are involved in any kind of creative anything whatsoever, you've probably been afflicted by imposter syndrome at some point. And I will say that, it's very cool and very amazing that my book has gone as far as it has, again, being on a New York Times bestseller list. But that also comes with a lot of expectation, and it comes with a lot of weight, because people who've read my books for the length of my career, which is 10 years now, they know I don't write the same thing over and over and over again. So my biggest worry, I think, because I have the next book from Tor that I'm releasing, comes out this September. It's called Under the Whispering Door. And if you look at the cover, it's done by the same cover artist, so it has a similar vibe, similar feel. And if you read the back, you'll see it is a book about, while it is a book about grief, it is also a book about kindness and trying to be a better person and trying to be a good person. And that sounds a little bit like The House in the Cerulean Sea. So I want people to not manage their expectations, but I want people who've only read this one book or only read a couple of my books to realize I don't write the same book over and over and over again. I can't do that. While I do have some of the same themes, I explore them from a different angle. The Under the Whispering Door is not going to be The House in the Cerulean Sea, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be a different book entirely. But since The House in the Cerulean Sea did as well as it did, I worry that people won't necessarily understand that, wanting to go into it, wanting to feel the exact same way that they did while reading The House in the Cerulean Sea. So the best way I can explain it is this. The House in the Cerulean Sea, I've heard from so many people, felt like a hug. Under the Whispering Door, when that comes out in September, that's going to be a shoulder to cry on. 2020 was, I think we needed a book like The House in the Cerulean Sea because of a lot of the crap that we all had to live through. And now that we're kind of on the other side of it, I wonder often if we've stopped to process the time that we've lost, if we've processed the grief of what we've lost. So I think that even though both books were written well before the pandemic, there's just kind of weird timing that these specific books will come out at these specific time. And I haven't written anything new in a couple of months, just because anytime I open that Microsoft Word document and look at that blank page, the cursor blinking, it kind of freaks me out a little. I'll get back there. I just need to calm myself down and just enjoy my success for right now. Because, maybe this will be the only time that I ever get to be on bestseller lists. And you know what? I'll take that, because I would have been able to do that. And not many people get to say that.
We don't believe it for a second. You'll be back.
We'll see. Fingers crossed, but
Well, you have made some lifelong followers in our group. I know that for sure.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind.
Okay, so now we have to change gears a little bit, and we do have to bring up, and this is sort of a delicate situation with Canada right now. But you do mention in an interview about the 60s scoop.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit, and sort of like you read about it and it came to play a part in the book?
Not necessarily. I'd already had the ideas for what I was going to do, and what I was trying to research orphanages, because I had no idea necessarily how orphanages worked. So I came across, when I was doing the research on orphanages, I came across the 60 Scoop, which is something that I had not heard of before. So I read more in detail about that. I listened to a podcast called Missing and Murdered, which is by an Indigenous reporter named Connie Walker. She worked for the CBC at the time. And it was talking about the second season in particular was about the 60 Scoop and a girl named Chloe, who was taken from her home. And it was the journey of her, Connie, the narrator, and the siblings of the little girl trying to find her. And from there, I went on and looked around to see what else, if this was a story that occurred around the world. And it did. It occurred in Canada. It occurred in the United States. It's occurring right now in the United States at the southern border. It occurred across the seas. It occurred the world over. So no, the 60 Scoop, as some people think, was not an inspiration. It was me doing research and finding out that this was a history that people had lived. This was a history that not only had happened in Canada, but had happened the world over. And it was just me being boggled that history seems to repeat itself no matter what we do, that we seem to be keeping and making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And I'm always in the belief that knowledge is power, and that sharing knowledge makes it more powerful. So.
Well, thank you for clarifying. You're right, though, like the discussion, and we did, especially in Canada, we touched upon those subjects right now, because there's a lot of news and a lot of really upsetting.
Yeah, about the residential schools and all of that. Yes. And it was funny when I don't know, it was like on Instagram or something like that. And somebody accused me of trauma or profiting off of trauma. And that really hurt. That upset me. And I understood, let me take that back. I didn't necessarily understand why they felt they could lob like an accusation like that at me, ascribing motivations that couldn't be farther from the truth. But that's not who I am. That's not what I do. I wrote a book about kindness. I wrote a book about being kind to people, about trying to be better than who we are. And I didn't take the history and pick and choose from one particular thing. I took the history of the entire world, because every civilized country on this earth at some point or another has done something similar. And it's shocking that many people don't know about that.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me is that I don't know Canadian school systems. I don't know what they teach, but here in the United States, we would have never learned about the 60 scoop, because we didn't learn about the atrocities that the colonizers committed against the natives who lived here before they came over across the pond. We didn't learn about that stuff. We learned about the American Thanksgiving, where the colonizers and the Native Americans sat down together in peace. And that's how it was. And that's how it is. History has been whitewashed. And I don't know if it's gotten better in how schools are now, but when I was a kid, we never learned about any of that stuff. All we learned was that America was A-okay.
Going through the Canadian school system, I definitely did not learn about the residential schools myself. I mean, they only closed when I was 10, which is baffling. But any book that brings to light discussions like these are important to have anyways. I mean, the way forward is through communication and discussion. So
and I get that. I get that some people want me to be a villain. And, if you need me to be the villain in your story, then I can be the villain in your story. But at the same time, please don't, again, ascribe motivations to me that aren't true, or take what I've said and twist it out of context. I wrote the story I did because I wanted to send a message about letting the smallest of us carve a space out for themselves in the world, and to do it through a lens of hope and kindness.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit, because there's so many quotes from your book that are really standalone quotes. And I just wonder, let me read one that really sort of impacted myself. Change often starts with the smallest of whispers, like-minded people building it up to a roar. Now, is that just like you writing the book and out it comes on the paper and you go back and you or was it something, because it's so quote worthy.
Thank you. But no, I don't write in terms of something that could be quote worthy. That's just going on, and it's funny. I've heard that quote said back to me many, many times over the last year and a half since a book came out. But I could tell you, when I was writing, even when I was editing, I didn't come across that line and think, oh, people are going to be saying that to me. It's just not something that I considered. I write to the best of my ability, and then my editor erases a lot of that and makes it even better. And I don't necessarily think in terms of lines that will necessarily resonate, except for one. There is one line in the book that I am very proud of, and that is between Linus and Lucy, when Lucy tells Linus towards the end that there's magic in the ordinary. I am very, very proud of that line, because it to me, it is the essence of the book itself.
Oh, okay, that's nice. So Mary, I didn't miss your question. She wants to know if you have any plans to do in-person appearances and signings to promote the new novel. And she wants you to come to Toronto, but
Yeah,
also
I would love to.
You've completely missed all in-person stuff.
I know. Like I went to, I think, like 4 or 5 in-person stuff in late 2019 and beginning of 2020. And then I was getting ready to fly out like 2 days later, when I got the call from my publisher that all tours were being canceled and switched over to online stuff. And so no, I haven't gotten to celebrate. I haven't gotten to go out and do anything with these books, and I'm hoping so. But I'm not going out this year. Tor is keeping everything virtual through 2021. But in 2022, fingers crossed, if everything goes well, I will be going out and touring, because I have 2 more books from Tor and Torteen coming out in 2022. So
you have to launch a whole nother book online.
Yeah, I have to do, because I have a YA book from Torteen coming out in 2 weeks that I have to do online. And then I have the one in September, Under the Whispering Door, that I will be doing online as well. And I get online, because online I get to talk to you guys. I get to do stuff like this. And online is cool because it gives people, in other countries who might not get a chance to see an author speak, because let's face it, America is the biggest publishing, has the biggest published companies in the world. and they tend to just keep us in America. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's cool that we get to have people who might not get to see us normally, but I want to go out, man. I want to go back out into the world and be able to talk to books with people face to face.
I don't blame you. We are really feeling that as well, since we are an in-person book club. All right. So Ada wants to know if there were any magical children that didn't make it into the final story.
No, every kid that is in the story was there and planned. There might have been me switching out some powers or try to make their appearance maybe a little bit different, but other than that, each of the kids and even almost named were how I planned it from the very beginning. Lucy and Linus were the first voices that I heard, which gave me the idea of wanting to pursue this further. And then the rest of them just almost came so very, very easy. I don't even know how easy it was. I don't know why it was so easy, but they did. And that doesn't always happen. As a matter of fact, that never really happened. So that's why I kind of knew I could run with this idea.
Now, do you have a cat?
I do. Her name is Otter, and she is sitting right down there staring at me. So
And
if you see her hop on the table, so.
Does she have any similarity? And I'm going to say her name wrong.
Calliope, yeah,
Calliope.
Let's be frank. Calliope is a bit of a dick, and so is my cat. Then Calliope is based off my cat Otter. Otter is I've had her for 14 years. I've had her since she was a feral kitten, and she only likes me and this one random friend of mine. Anybody else, she will hiss and growl and stalk you if you're in my house and she doesn't want you to be.
Oh, that's funny. Were any of the children your favorite to write, or? Yep. Oh,
I have a very, very, very easy favorite, and that's Chauncey. I love Chauncey. I love Chauncey so much. And the reason I love Chauncey so much is because of his singular focus to wanting to be a bellhop. You remember when you were a kid and you found something that you wanted to be when you grow up, and that became your fixation. For me, it was after watching Indiana Jones and deciding that I would be totally okay with kissing Harrison Ford, that I wanted to be an archaeologist. And that was at the age of 11. And then the next year I saw the movie Alien. So then I decided I wanted to be an archaeologist astronaut. And that literally lasted probably until I was like 15 or 16 years old. But I understood the focus of wanting to be something so badly that it consumes you. And that's what Chauncey has. He wants to be a bellhop so badly. And it's something so innocent that it just makes me happy when I think about it. He is a literal ball of sunshine, and he has been and always will be my favorite.
I think we're glad you have a favorite, because some authors are like a little bit hesitant.
No, I never do
like
that.
Your children,
I will tell you
right?
my favorite. Yeah, I will tell you my favorite off the top. That's not a problem.
Okay, Jennifer wants to know how you switch from YA to adult, or do you not really plan specifically for some to be YA and others to be adult?
No, I plan very specifically between what is why. Like my YA series, it's about a 16-year-old kid obsessed with superheroes, and so that was obviously going to be YA, and that's called The Extraordinaries. That came out last year. The sequel comes out this July, and those books were always going to be YA because I wanted to write books that I wish I could have had when I was 15, 16 years old. The House in the Cerulean Sea, originally, I wasn't necessarily thinking about children reading this book because in the original manuscript, there was a lot more cursing in the manuscript itself. As a matter of fact, there were 3 instances of the F word, because that is my favorite word of all time to use, to write and to say. And my editor came to me during the edits and said, if we removed these 3 words, these 3 instances of the F word, you are going to be able to open your audience so much bigger, because parents will go to bookstores, parents will go to libraries, and they will ask their the booksellers and librarians if there are F words. And if they hear that there are F words, they will not buy the book for their children. And you know what? That's totally fine. I said the F word many times when I was 9, 10, 11 years old, but you know, that was just me. So we took that out, and now I'm a children's author, and I don't know how that happened. So
It's so funny to hear you say that because I've done about 4 book clubs on this book now, and I've talked to a lot of teachers, and they think it's such a great choice for schools and
Yeah,
required reading.
I've had, there have been, like 3 weeks ago, I did a book club with a middle school class and all these children. And if you've never had a bunch of children dissecting your words, let me tell you, that is terrifying. That is scary. But, and then I've had, the book already put into lesson plans in middle school and high school. There's one college is doing a course on it and other books like it. And I don't know, man. It's just all been very weird.
It's so nice that they're updating it because I feel like I have a 16-year-old stepson, and I think he's still reading what I was reading in high school. How can it be possibly? I mean, I'm sure there's still some themes that are relevant, but you'd think there'd be better
Right.
literature for them to be reading. All right, so Linda wants to know if you work with children or spend a lot of time with children because you understand them very well.
I do not. I do not have children, and I do not work with children. And the children in my life are the daughters of my 2 best friends in the entire world. But they are now turning. The kids are now turning 13, 14 years old, so they're not going to be children much longer. But look, I knew how it felt when I was a kid to feel like I had an otherness inside of me. I knew how that felt. And how that made me different, because when you're a kid and you feel different because you are different, whether it be because you're queer or have ADHD or anything like that, you don't see yourself as being able to relate to others. And if there's one thing that's very hard for kids to do, is to relate to their peers. And when I was writing this book, I wasn't necessarily thinking about, well, you know what, let me walk that back. I was thinking very clearly that I did not want this book to talk down to the children, to the child characters, because you read the books where children can be children and maybe they can be a little precocious, and there's a fine line to walk with that. But this book in essence is about Linus and his journey, but in reality, it's about these kids. And I wanted to make sure that there was no talking down to them, that they were treated like they had minds of their own, treated like they were their age that they were, yes, and that they were children, but treated as if they didn't need anything necessarily be sugar-coated, treated them and talked to them to hold actual conversation, to challenge them, to make them think, to make them laugh, to make them hope. And that's essentially what it came down to for me. I don't have any formal education working with children, but I know how it felt for me when I was a kid, feeling like I couldn't fit in. And I just drew from that.
So Angelica has a question about Linus and the way he thinks about himself, specifically his size. Was there a reason why his size was brought up so much in the book?
There was, because I used to be overweight. And I remember how I felt when I was overweight. I felt that that everyone would watch me. Let me be clear about that. When I see older pictures of me, I was probably about 30, 40 pounds heavier, and I'm 6'4". So
Wow.
yeah, I'm a tall guy, but I was still, to this day, I don't necessarily feel comfortable in my own skin. It's a process that I have to go through. I'm 39 years old and I'm still trying to find ways to like myself. But I remember how I felt when I had extra weight on me. And it wasn't necessarily wanting to deal with internalized fat phobia per se, but with Linus, I wanted him to worry about such things, like worry about his job, worry about his health, worry about his weight, and then realize as he got to the island and his life filled with color, that maybe stuff like that didn't necessarily matter. Maybe stuff like that wasn't what was important, and that he could learn to love and accept himself while he was trying to teach love and acceptance to other people.
Thank you for
I love that. I'm sorry for unmuting myself, but
Go for it.
I appreciate you saying that. It was a topic on our chapter about it, and we were kind of like, but why is he doing this? He's such a good person. And so I appreciate your explanation and kind of insight on that, because it's very helpful to understand where you're coming from, because without your explanation, or maybe, you're just kind of helping me understand that a little bit more. I loved your book 100%, but I'm a little less judgy on how often his size is brought up. So thank you
Right.
for clarifying.
Of course. And it's not meant to overtake the book, but it is meant to be a running commentary to show the way his thoughts shift as his art progresses. But I get that it can make some people uncomfortable, and I don't want to say that was the point, but I remember how it was for me and how uncomfortable I felt in my own skin, and how sometimes I still feel that way.
All right, so we're finished with the portion. We only have a few minutes left, but we're finished with the portion about the book specifically, and we're going to ask you a couple questions just about yourself, really.
Okay.
If a movie was made of your life, what genre would it be, and who would play you?
Oh dear God, probably James Corden. And it would be a horror romantic comedy. So.
Very good. All right. Do you have a favorite bookshop in the world?
I do. Oh man, I love being able to do this. So if you are from Portland, then, or even Oregon, you probably know of Powell's. Powell's bookstore is, the main Powell's is the size of like 3 city blocks in Portland. And it is a new and used bookstore. And I can go there and go on Portland on vacation, and Powell's is my vacation. I can go there every day, spend all day there every day. And because what's really wonderful about this bookstore is it's 4 floors, the size of 3 city blocks, and yet all the bookshelves and the aisles of the bookshelves are so tiny that if you want to pass, 2 skinny people passing each other by have to turn to face each other to be able to fit by. And the bookshelves tower above you, and the shelves are old, so sometimes they lean a little bit, and it is the most magical place in the world. And I love Powell's. So if you ever get a chance to go to Portland, Oregon, go to Powell's. You will not regret it.
Awesome. Good recommendation. A Netflix show you're currently binging or have recently binged?
Yes, I just finished, because I love horror. I love watching horror. I don't like it when it gets violent. I don't like, the torture porn kind of horror, but I just finished watching a zombie show on Netflix called Black Summer. And zombies, I kind of got over zombies with the billion seasons of The Walking Dead, but Black Summer, man, there's just something about it. It was very scary without being violent, and it was a delight, and I was very happy to watch it.
All right. I'm not sure I'll be watching that. We're always on the hunt for our next great read. Do you have a book on your to be read list that you can recommend to us?
September 28th, there's a book coming out called A Light from Uncommon Stars. It is by a trans Asian author named Rika Aoki. It is, and I say this I'm not a hyperbolic person. You have to take my word on that, but it is one of the best books I've ever had the pleasure to read. I was given an advance copy to blurb, and it was my great honor. This is Rika's first book with a mainstream publisher, and she is going to be a force to be reckoned with. A Light from Uncommon Stars releases September 28th from Tor, and it is a queer mishmash of science fiction and fantasy, and it's unlike anything I've ever read, and I wholeheartedly recommend it without reservation.
Awesome. We will add that to the comments too below, so that if anybody's looking for it, there'll be a link to it. Is it out yet, TJ?
September 28th
Sorry,
is
you
when it
said
comes
that,
out.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'll write her name in the chat so you guys can put it on there.
Perfect. That would be helpful. Ebook, paperback, or audiobook?
Paperback. I love having a book in my hand that I can hear the pages turn and smell the book, the paper, and everything like that. I don't like, I stare at a screen for most of the day when I'm writing, so I don't like looking at my Kindle or a phone to read. So I always try to get a physical copy of a book.
Perfect. And this question might be hard to answer. I've asked a couple of authors this, and they don't always have an answer. But What is your, if you don't like this, you can't be my friend book?
Oh, I can totally do this one. Let me think real quick. If you don't like this, we can't be friends. Oh, I'm going to pick a good one that's going to, because, okay, look, right across the room from me right now is my dog, Hendrix. He is my best friend, the love of my life. I love that dude. He is the best thing in the world. And I do not like reading books where dogs die. I do not like that. I do not like watching TV shows where dogs die. I do not like watching movies where dogs die. There's a website called Does the Dog Die that you can look up books and movies and TV, and it'll tell you if a dog dies in that. That being said, Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls. And I read that book. I've read that book at least once a year since I was 11 years old. And I actually just reread it a few weeks ago. It is one of my favorite books of all time. And if you know how it ends, and you know that I just made myself a liar by saying I never read books where bad things happen to dogs, but it filled my heart with so much joy and so much sadness when I was a kid. And that feeling, it's very rare for me when I read a book that I feel that much in that short of time, because the book isn't very long. And I love that book to pieces. And not a lot of people will go there with me because they know what happens in the end of the book.
Very good. Yeah, Joanne wrote the name of the book in the chat. So if anybody's looking for that, then you have it there. TJ, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. We are so excited that you have so much coming out that we don't have to be left, because often writers write a book and then we won't hear from them for 5 years. So this is excellent news.
Yeah, no, I have 6 books in the next 3 years. So
How many of those are done?
5.
Oh, excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you. I write a lot.
Clearly. All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us this evening. And again, thank you so much. And we can't wait. We hope we can do this again.
I will gladly come back. Thank you so much for all your time. I appreciate it, guys. Bye.